these things that have gone before were the talk of the country. Wherever you went, you heard of misery and want. The Luddites had the approval of the people. Not, of course, everybody, but the working man, even those whose own handicraft was not threatened by the new frames, favoured the Luddites. I do not know how it came about, but I was soon made aware that I was well regarded. When I went to chapel at Powell, people made way for me as though I was somebody. For me, I hated most genuinely the secrecy and underhandedness of the thing. I dreaded meeting my cousin George, but I knew it had to be done. My mind was fully made up to tell him I could not continue by his side on this organised attack on machines. The objection to machinery was that it displaced human labour. Well, I argued, a scythe is a machine, so is a pair of scissors. If I proposed to do away with the scythe at hay time and clip our 3-acre field with my mother's scissors, everyone would think me a lunatic. But somehow, as I walked down to the brig to have my talk with George, I got less and less comfort from my logic the nearer I grew to Huddersfield. George was at home, in a towering rage. I could not have found a worse time for my errand.
You're just the man I wanted to see, Ben. I feel I must talk to somebody and let steam off a bit.
Whatever's up, George? Do sit down and talk quiet and sensible. One would think you'd lost your wits, and I particularly wanted a quiet talk.
Listen here. I'd been up to Linfit and were coming along the road back to the cropping shop. I'm just above the Warren House by Radcliffe's plantation when I saw a woman about 30 years old crouched against the wall. I could see a pair of men's shoes sticking out from underneath her skirt, and it's my belief she'd nowt on her but just that shirt and an old thin black shawl. She was crying and moaning and rocking herself to and fro, and she'd a bundle of something in her arms. I didn't know her, but I stopped to see what ailed her. She'd been down to Huddersfield to see the relieving officer. Her husband was a cropper. He'd been thrown out of work. His master had put in 2 frames, so he'd had to leave. He's down with the rheumatic fever. They'd nowt to eat or drink. She'd been suckling the baby, and as time went on, she'd no milk in her breast for the little un. She'd fed it for days by soaking a rag with warm milk and water and let it suck on that. And then it had the convulsions, and she'd had to leave her man raving with the fever and hug the brat to Huddersfield, and there they had nowt for her. She opened her shawl, and as I'm a living man, there were the little one with a head no bigger than my fist, stark dead at its mother's breast. Its eyes were staring and staring, and its face was all drawn with pain. It made my heart stand still, and I felt as if a strong man were clutching my throat. I stood there before her mute. Just then I heard the sound of a horse's trot, and I turned round, and there were a horseful of Ottywells coming up the road. I don't know what possessed me, but I grabbed the child from its mother's arms and stepped right in front of his horse. He swerved and he swayed in the saddle.
Damn you! Mind where you're walking! Stand aside and leave the road free, you drunken tramp!
I stood in front of his horse and held up the child above the horse's head, and I thrust it right in his face. I said, "Look at thy work, William Horsfall, look at thy work and be glad."
Out of my way, you villain!
And then he drew his mare up onto its haunches and lifted his stock high in the air and brought it down with all his might, right across my face. Then he dug his spur into the mare and sprang off with a bound up the road.
I've marked you, George Miller. I've marked you, and you know for what you are. You've not heard the last of this.
But I cared nothing for what he said. I gave the wee body back to its mother and all the brass I had on me. As the Lord's above me, that blow shall cost William Horsfall dear.
You won't like my errand, George, but I've settled to tell you, and tell you what's on my mind.
Well, what is it, lad? I'm easier now, I've had me say.
You know what's fixed for next Saturday?
I do that, Ben, and all goes well with that. I've had word that a big force from Leeds will join us near Rowfolds, and some will be there from Bradford and Dewsbury. The movement's spreading, lad. It's spreading and it's growing, and the time's at hand when General Ludd will have an army that'll sweep all before it.
I shall be there, George.
Of course you will, Ben. Those doors of Cartwright's will stand some braying, but you can splinter his panels and burst his locks, I'm thinking.
I will be there, George, for my word's past. But after that night, you must do without me.
You'll not turn tail, Ben. Why, the Visory's at hand, man. One blow and the game's our own.
I'm no traitor, George, but it hurts me to tell thee. I know what you say about the suffering of the poor, but we're on a wrong tack, George. Enoch's not going to stop machinery. The masters are stubborn. We may break 1,000 frames and clear every machine out of every mill and shop in England, but better ones will take their place. We cannot go on forever with midnight raids and secret meetings. The law's too strong for us, George.
Then what would you do, Ben? Are the working classes to sit down and watch their families die by inches? If you don't like my methods, tell me better. I don't like stealing about like a thief any more than you do. But this is only the beginning, Ben, only the beginning.
And the end?
We'll strike higher and further. Before many weeks are over, I'll throw off all disguise. I'll call on every man that has a heart to join me, and we'll march with swelling ranks till we stand an army at the very gates of Westminster. And there we will thunder for our claims and wring from an abject parliament the rights without which we are driven slaves.
And have you counted the cost, George?
Aye, that I have. If we succeed, who can tell what we may not accomplish? These cruel, lagging wars that keep corn beyond our reach and are useful only to find riches and glory for the ruling families of the land shall finish. The toiling masses of England shall clasp in friendship the hand of the uprisen people of France. We will drive from office and power those lords and landowners who for centuries have used the resources of this country, wrung from the helpless taxpayer as their own privy purse. We will establish a parliament in which the poor man's voice will be heard. And if we fail, why then, Ben, we will have died in a glorious cause, and George Mellor, for one, would rather shed his blood in such a cause than sit mute and consenting, a crushed and heartless unit of a people hugging its own chains.
I'm with you, George, in an open fight, though I seem to feel a rope around my neck as I say it. But for heaven's sake, George, get into the open as soon as you can, for I've forgotten how to hold up my head. But you convinced me, George. I came to get out of a conspiracy, but you've nobbut pledged me to rebellion. But at least I've my own self-respect, and that's something gained.
Spoken like your own self, Ben. Now, let's talk of Saturday night and no looking back.
It was almost 10 o'clock of the Saturday night when I left the house on tiptoe. I opened the door and strode off down the hill. I met not a soul till I came to Kitchen Fold, and here, by the Black Bull, was Soldier Jack. He handed me a huge sledgehammer and showed me a pistol that he himself was to handle. We walked briskly towards Huddersfield. Jack was very still. As we neared the spot, we saw other figures moving quickly in the same direction. Some were dressed in smocks, and all had their faces part concealed. When we got near the steeple, I put on my mask and Jack his. From all sides, across fields, down byways, from Robert Town, from High Town, men, singly and in small groups, were gathering. All were curiously still. So I gave a start when a slim form moved by my side, sprung from I don't know where, and John Booth's voice whispered.
I know you by your height, Ben, and the swing of your gait, and Soldier Jack isn't hard to tell with his limp. But here we are by the steeple, and here comes our leader.
Look at us. We shall make a brave show, and Soldier Jack. Those lads from Leeds will know what it means to have a soldier to smarten this up.
George, let us go and check how each is armed.
Ben, we've a good half hour to wait here before we start. There are not above 100 of us here all told, and we counted on 5 times that number. The Leeds men will meet us, or should meet us near Rawfolds. But Bradford and Dewsbury have sent a mere handful of those that should have come. George is putting a brave face on, but he's so vexed all the same.
We've enough for the job. If 100 cannot force Rawfolds, 1,000 cannot. We'll do well to start to know our luck.
This is my last venture, Ben.
And mine too, by moonlight. Daylight or nout, I say.
There will be sharp work at Rawfolds. The mill is well garrisoned. Cartwright is a bold, resolute man. He will defend his machines at any hazard and any cost. There will be bloodshed. There must be bloodshed. Something tells me my days are numbered.
You're just talking daft.
If I don't come back to Huddersfield with you, Ben, you'll find a paper at Mrs. Wright's telling you what to do with my things. It'll be you to tell my father and Faith. No one else must do it. Promise me that.
You'll not fall, John. Stick as close to me as you can get. When we come to the mill, I'll see nobody touches you, if I can help it.
Do you like Faith, Ben? I've thought of late that she turns to you and seems to lean on your strength. You'll stand by her, won't you, if the worst comes to the worst? Promise me, Ben. Ben, pledge me this promise, and I'll go to this night's work with a lighter heart.
George and Thorpe and Soldier Jack were forming the party into companies. There looked to be some 200 of us. Jack arranged us in the order deemed best. We were drawn up in a long line close by the steeple. The men of the first company had pistols or muskets or firearms of any sort. They were to march first. Behind the shooters, drawn up, 2 abreast, were the hatchet men. Behind them were to march my own lads, about a score of us, big men all of us, and each of us slung a hammer over his shoulder. I was captain of the hammer men, and on my shoulder I bore a mighty weapon that few could sling. Behind my company was more or less a rabble, men unarmed or with bludgeons only. What good they were, or expected to be, it would puzzle me to say. They were Luds, and that was enough.
Now, lads, we've 3 good miles to Rawfolds and the night's getting shorter. Before day breaks, our work must be done. Show yourselves men but this night, and you will bring the masters to their knees. You fight for home and hearth and the right to live. If there is one among you whose heart fails him, let him step out and leave us. And now, men, ready? Forward!
George placed himself at the head of the column, and we moved steadily on in the dark, glad of the motion, for our blood was chilled with standing. And I, for one, thought less when I was moving, and the less I thought, the better it suited me. John Booth was in the rear, for he could use neither axe nor hammer, and pistols he would have nought to do with. Every now and then George ran past me on his way down the ranks, and I could see his eyes lit up with fire, for he had lost or thrown away his mask. It was near the White Hart Inn, and we were to be joined by the Leeds men, so we halted to wait for them.
Do you know where the soldiers are billeted?
Aye, mostly Hague House in Huyton.
Hadn't we better send a party to engage 'em and cut 'em off?
There's more at Millbridge. They're all around us. If you try to stop one not coming, why not another?
There's somewhat in that. Anyway, we mustn't stop. They're shivering here. You must keep 'em moving, General. There's nowt many's worse than waiting in the dark. They get scared of their own shadows and start at their own thoughts. Push us forward, George, and let us get to close quarters, for every minute wasted now means a deserter.
Right you are, soldier. I've noticed more than one slinking off, but I thought it best not to say out.
And forward, men. If the Leeds men miss it, all the more glory will be ours. Now forward and no more lagging.
We moved on again, turning sharply down the lane that led from the moor towards the mill. We could see the buildings now. The mill itself, 4 stories high, with smaller buildings clustering near it. Not a light was to be seen. Now we moved quickly to the mill yard, and out into the night came from within the fierce baying of the watchdog. It had not bayed 2 minutes when a single light shone out from the counting house, and we could see it more from window to window, and then other lights glowed from other partitions of the mill. The watchers within had heard the faithful hound and doubtless speeding to their posts and standing to their arms.
Rush to the gate, archers to the front, musket men, line up! Give them a volley in the windows! Now, lads, spread yourselves! Cover the windows! Bullets and stones, my lads! Let them have it!
Stand by me, John Bould. Do not leave my side as you love your sister.
My place is elsewhere, Ben.
Stand by me, I tell you. See, the outer door gives. They're in! They're in! Follow me! Come, John!
I sprang forward and rushed into the mill yard. The glass was falling from the frames with crash upon crash. Sticks and stones were flying above my head. The volleys of musketry made their din, and now from loopholes and from windows came answering shots. We could see the streak of fire from the barrels and hear the sharp ping of the bullets as they whizzed about our heads. Our men roared and roared again and yelled with frenzied cries. There were men there who could do nought but roar and yell and curse. They had only sticks and hatchets until the doors were down. Sticks and hatchets were of no avail. I bounded to the front. The door stood staunch and true. I rushed at it with a curse and a cry. You could hear the din of my every blow rolling away into the emptiness of the mill within. From the great bolt heads that studded the panels, the sparks flew fast and thick as I thundered at the door. There was room only for me, and above the roar of the mob, above the yells and curses and cries, above the thud of stones and the crash of falling glass, rang out the mighty sound of Enoch's echoing thunder. With every blow that fell, quivering shocks ran up my arm as the hammer dithered in my grasp, and still I pounded at the door, and still the stout timbers yielded not a jot.
Way for Enoch!
Way for Enoch! It's no use, Ben. It's no use, I fear. But you keep praying. Hold your strength, lad. You'll need it.
Let's try at the back. To the back, Ben. There's a way in at the back, they say.
And that was near the last sound I heard. I fell back from the door, and I think I raised my hand to my head to wipe away the sweat that was blinding my eyes. Then I was aware of a sharp, burning, boring pain in the muscle of my upper arm, and Enoch fell with a clatter to the cobbles of the yard, and I turned sick and dizzy and faint. My eyes had a film before them, and I reeled and swayed like a drunken man, and when I tried to lift my arm, 100 daggers seemed to dig deep into my shoulder. My arm fell useless by my side.
He's hit! They've hit Ben! Bear up, Ben, you mustn't fall. Brace your legs, man. By God, he's wounded.
And everything swam around me, and I knew no more. When I came to my senses, I was for a time conscious only of my agony. I was stretched on a pile of straw in a lofty room with bare walls. A mere slit high up in one wall let in a stream of light, but the corner in which I lay was almost wholly dark. Jack was by my side and pressed a mug to my lips.
That's right, Ben. You're better now. Take a swig of this, it'll do thee good.
Where are we, Jack?
Don't worry. We're safe for a bit. It's somebody I know. We're not far from Fixby. That's all I can tell thee.
And the mill? Have we taken the mill? Where are all the boys? What am I doing lying here? Oh, I remember now. I was hitting my arm. Where's George? Oh, tell me all, Jack.
Take another sip of this and lie quiet. You'd best not talk so much. I thought you were done for. There's nothing for it, Ben, but patience. I know the farm man here, and as good luck would have it, his master's away. So we're all right for a day, and as soon as night comes, we're off.
Tell me what's happened. I can't settle till you do.
Not much to tell. After you were hit, I caught you and dragged you to one side. You were bleeding like a pig. I cut away your vest and your shirt and put my fingers to the hole where the bullet is, and didn't you groan? But I could feel nought, so I bandaged you up with your shirt, and there you lay like a log. Others were running off in all directions. Some were crying out to them to run, some were ordering them to stop. George was like one off his head. I saw him jump on the lower windows and grasp a frame with jagged glass all round and shake it and gnash his teeth at those in the mill. But someone dragged him down, and all the while that damned bell were clanging. Then somebody cried out that the soldiers were coming. I thought I heard the galloping of horses' hooves, but I couldn't be sure.
What of John Booth? Did he get away safe? Did he go with George?
I'd enough on with you on my hands. Go to sleep, will you? You're talking too much.
Jack, tell me, then I'll be quiet.
Hell, but Booth was hit, that's all I know. I saw him lying on the ground and he was bleeding in the leg, but someone will see to him, and we're to wait here till after dark, Ben. Rest now.
After that, I must have dozed off. The weary day dragged its lingering length. I slept in fits and starts. I could hear the crowing cock and the clucking of hens in the yard outside. And after what seemed an eternity of time, the cows were driven in from the pastures for milking. I heard a voice coaxing them in. Then there were two voices, a man's and a woman's, and some talk. I strained my ears to catch. Luds. Soldiers. Dead. Poor lad. This was from the woman, but I could not piece the fragments to make sense. Later still, as the gloom deepened, I heard the sound of wheels. The door was opened cautiously.
Get up, Ben, and make as little noise as they can.
Jack held me by the shoulder, and leaning heavily on him, I got to the door. Outside was our good old Bess. One of the other lads had brought her. Jack had it all arranged. Between them, they lifted me into the cart, and I sank, exhausted by the effort and the pain, onto the bottom of the cart. It was covered in hay, and in one corner was our new roan calf.
I'll get you home, Ben. The soldiers are scouring the country. The Luddites are hiding for their lives. There's hell to pay over last night's work. But I won't hurry. I'll jointly as little as I can.
What's the calf doing here?
Cover you up with straw, leave your nose out and nought else. Then if we meet a search party, they'll happen think I'm fetching a calf here. Now, hush. Come on, Bess. Whoa, steady.
We lumbered off, past the top of Lindley. We passed a party of mounted soldiers about halfway on our journey. Unfortunately, at the very moment of our encounter, the calf staggered, straddling to its feet. It rocked and swayed in the cart and moved feebly at the soldiers as they drew rein.
Have you seen any suspicious characters on the road, my good man?
Only a tramp or two, and a man looked like he'd been fighting. T'other side of Lindley, that were.
Forward, men!
And they bothered us no more. My mother met us at the door, and my father stood aloof and would not speak one word. I sank down into the cool, clean sheets of my bed and laid my head upon the grateful feather pillow. Then I heard the kitchen door open and a quick step ascend the stairs.
Now then, Mrs. Bamforth, where is he? Let's have a look at him.
Here he is, Dr. Dean.
Bullet in the biceps, hemorrhage of the artery, acute inflammation, temperature equatorial, fever, ravings, pandemonium generally, Mrs. Bamforth. How do you feel?
Oh, I'm well enough in the body, Doctor, but not to boast of.
I don't think you're very well, Mrs. Bamforth. I detect you, my dear lady. That give me grave alarm.
Why, good gracious, Doctor, whatever do you mean? Why, my appetite's good.
That aggravates the complaint.
I sleep well. At least I did till a night since.
Mrs. Bamforth, you must take to your bed at once, and you must not stir out of it until I give you leave. You must send Mary to the surgery at once, and I'll make you up a bottle, and 3 times a day you must take it.
But I ale note, Doctor.
You may pour it down the sink. You may pour it down the sink. You must impress it on Mary. I'll tell her myself that you are dangerously ill. I'll drive up myself to see you. You must tell Mary to mind she says nothing about it in the village. And if anybody asks where Ben is, he's gone on his rounds now. Do you understand?
Yes, Dr. Dean.
It may be a fortnight before Ben is fit to be moved, and then mark you, he must be moved, and for my credit's sake, if for no other reason, not a soul of this house must know Ben's within 100 miles of this.
God bless you, Doctor. I've been wondering and wondering ever since he got home, whatever we should say to the neighbours. And you've found a way all in a minute. See what it is to be educated. I'll be in bed before you were out of the house. And mind you'll drill it into our William, for he's that stupid he'll spoil it all, and for sure I don't feel very well. It's my heart, Doctor.
And I think my mother came as near winking as ever she did since she made lovers' signals across the pews when my father was caught in her.